Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Your Career Unscripted. I'm your host, Jane Bernhard, and I interview business leaders and rising leaders on their career path to hopefully inspire yours. And I am incredibly excited about our guest today. I can say for certain that I've never been so excited to interview someone. I'm so excited to talk to you. Our guest today is Jill Furman. Jill Furman, producer, seeks to produce groundbreaking commercial work that surprises audiences. On Broadway, she has produced Suss, Tony nomination, Hamilton, Tony Award, In the Heights, Tony Award, Freestyle, Love Supreme, Special Tony Award, Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, The Heiress, Seminar, West Side Story, The Drowsy Chaperone, Sly Fox, and Fortune's Fool. On TV and film, she executive produced Hamilton for Disney+, Emmy Award, and In the Heights. She also produced Hulu's We Are Freestyle, Love Supreme, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2020. In 2011, she received the Robert Whitehead Award for Outstanding Achievement in Commercial Theater Producing. Jill's a native New Yorker. She received a BA from Brown and an MBA from Columbia. Jill's on the board of the Lung Cancer Research Foundation and is a member of the President's Advisory Council for the Arts at Brown University. She is also an emerita member of the Brown Board of Trustees. In 2024, Jill was named to Forbes 50 over 50 list in the lifestyle category. Jill, I'm so excited to talk to you. I have so many questions for you as someone that grew up in the theater space. And I first talked to you before I went to business school, I think in like 2019, and you were very kind to give me your time and read through a play that I wrote. And I remember talking to you and being so inspired by your career and the fact that you were willing to give me time, and then going to business school and everything and just seeing everything that you've done is amazing. And I've seen so many of the shows that you have produced. In the Heights was one of the first Broadway shows I ever saw. And so the work that you've done has had a big impact on me. And so getting to have this conversation with you is awesome for me. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for asking me. And, I will speak to anyone who reaches out to me about the business and about business school and just, for career advice, because, people paid it forward for me and I want to do it for others.
That's amazing. And I promise to pay this forward too, for sure. So you have had the most incredibly impressive theater career. I want to start at the beginning. Can you tell me what brought you into the world of theater and also what inspired you to build your career in the arts?
Sure, I'd be happy to share it with you. I took a little bit of a circuitous route to get to theater. I went to Brown and I concentrated in art history, and I love art, and actually, having done that sort of opened up my eyes to analyzing art, even though it's a different kind of art, and I still do that on a daily basis in my work. But I worked at a gallery one summer and it wasn't right for me, and I ended up in the movie business because I always thought I wanted to be a film producer, because I grew up in a family. My father is an investment banker that specializes in media and entertainment. He's also a theater producer now, which I'll get to. But so I grew up reading Variety and discussing, the box office grosses, and when there were 3 networks, we would talk about the ratings when ratings really meant something. Like we would try to guess them. I mean, we were kind of insane. But so it's sort of in my blood. I've always loved entertainment, and I worked at ICM in New York, talent agency, and then I went to LA and I did I had a few different jobs in the movie business, and then I decided I wanted to get out of LA and I thought it would be helpful for me to get an MBA because I wanted to start a production company. At the time, it was a film production company, but I thought, at Brown, I didn't have to take math. I was terrified of numbers, and so I just thought it would legitimize me in a way to have an MBA, even though most producers don't have MBAs. So I went, and afterwards, I made a movie that nobody saw. It was a very low budget independent movie, but I learned how to do it. I raised all the money from friends and family. It was a very interesting and exciting learning experience. But it only went to a few festivals. It never got distribution. And then when I was still trying to figure all this out, my father started producing theater in earnest. And he started a small production company with 2 other men who were in the business. And so the way I got into theater was I associate produced a few of those, well, actually all of those plays with them. They did 3. They did 2 on Broadway and 1 off Broadway. So that was just a way for me to, to try it out and see what I liked. And I love working with my dad. He's a great mentor. We're very close. He's very smart. I owe so much of my career to him and the doors that he opened. But when we were doing the last one, which was a revival of Sly Fox starring Richard Dreyfuss, an actor who was in the movie that I made called me and said, you need to go see this show. It's being workshopped in the basement of the Drama Bookshop. It's like a Latino Rent. And this was the end of 2002 when he called me. And so at that time, Rent came out in 96. So everything was a something Rent, right? But I thought, okay, this is what I do. And I, you never know. So I went to the Drama Bookshop, which had a tiny little black box theater. And I saw a very, very early version in February of 2003 of In the Heights. And Lin-Manuel at the time had written the book, the music, the lyrics. He started it when he was at Wesleyan. He was, I think, a year out of school, maybe not even a full year. I can't remember, but he was a baby. But he came out on stage, and the show went through a lot of changes, and we brought on a book writer later on. But what amazed me was he came out on stage and he was rapping as Usnavi, the bodega owner, and telling us about his world, his neighborhood, his day. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've never heard music like this on stage before. And it's not, I liked hip hop, but it wasn't scary, it wasn't off-putting. It was just storytelling. And he was so charming and so talented. And I just, we always say, like, we sat forward in our seat in the way, like, that we don't usually do. And that was thrilling. And that's when, in fact, I knew I wanted to be in the theater business, because I was still harboring a hope to get back into film. And I love film. I love film as a medium. But when I saw Lynn, I went back to my father and I said, Dad, it's been great working with you. I've loved it, but I have found this person whose life I need to be in, who I think is, has the markings of a genius, and I want to be in his life. And so that was the start. That was really the start of theater. And I grew up going to the theater. I'm from New York. I love the theater, but it wasn't like, I wasn't one of these theater kids who had to do theater. It's just, I knew I wanted to be a producer in entertainment. So, so I credit that to changing my whole life. And I always tell young people, in your 20s, you really don't need to know what you want to do. I mean, it's great if you think but I wasn't a theater producer until I was in my 30s, and I wasn't a successful theater producer until I was in my mid 30s. And so, you just never know. So anyway, and then, that was the beginning of a very long, involved story and process, but that's how I really got into it and knew I wanted to do it.
That is the most amazing story. That's what inspired you to do everything that you've done. Can you talk about, so you saw this production of In the Heights, and then what did you do from there? Did you talk to Lynn? Like, what was the process?
Yes.
From there?
Yes. I talked to Tommy Kail, who's the director, and I told him how much I loved it, and we got to know one another. And then I met with him and Lynn, and we talked about my coming on board, which was very exciting. I had never done it, so that was February of 2003 when I first saw it, and then there were a few other presentations that they did, and so I got very lucky. I always say, luck is the residue of design, right? Because you have to do something with the luck that you're presented with, right? You can't, it happens, but then you got to make something of it, right? So I was at another presentation in June of 2003, and Kevin McCullum came to see it. And, Kevin and his then business partner, Jeffrey Seller, had produced Rent. We got to talking afterwards, ended up going to Orso for dinner with my dad and my late mother. We joke that it was the best piece of pizza, best pizza we've ever had, because that was when, I talked to him about working with him. Because what I've always said is, I learned so much from them, from Kevin and Jeffrey, because I didn't know what I was doing. I know that In the Heights would not have happened without me, but I also know it wouldn't have happened with them. So that's another thing I always tell people, work with people who you respect and who you can learn from. I love working with people who are smarter than I am. And, it's a constant evolving process, producing theater, and every show has its own DNA. So you're learning something on every show. So that's what happened. And so with Kevin, we optioned it. And Jeffrey actually didn't see it till a little later on, because he was at something else that evening. But we optioned, we started working with them. And we did some more presentation. Workshop development of a project takes a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And we decided that Lin could benefit from benefit from a book writer to help with the process. So that we brought on Kiara Hooties, and she was an invaluable part of the team, and they spoke the same language. And also Kiara was the first person in her family to go to college, so she really, the material spoke to her. And our protagonist was a woman, so it was very helpful, I think, for Lin to have Kiara working with him on that. And then it just, it went from there, and there were many, many years of development. And we went to the O'Neill, in 2005. After the O'Neill, we cut a character who had been an integral part of the story, because he didn't work anymore. And there also had been a love triangle between this character and his sister Nina and Benny. So that all went away, and there was a lot of, at that time it was a little bit of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because it's a process. That's all I'll say. But it was delightful and wonderful, but it was, you never know what's going to work, and then you have this whole team that's so brilliant, and everyone's working on it together, and so anyway, it was an amazing experience, all in.
I love hearing these stories, because I grew up listening to all this music, so it's such great detail. For anyone listening who doesn't know what a producer does, can you kind of break it down, like what you're spending your time doing throughout the creative process?
Sure. Yeah. There are a lot of different kinds of producers, and I've been an associate producer. I've been a co-producer. When you're a lead producer, which is what I like to do, you're basically the CEO of a small corporation, and you're overseeing every aspect of the development of a show. One thing I like about being a lead producer is I get to use both sides of my brain. I have the business. Well, it's still creative side is still like my real go-to and my passion, but I do have the MBA, and I'm not scared of numbers anymore. So I rely on both things, because ultimately, if you can't raise the money to produce the show, then you're not going to have a show, right? So it's about creative development. It's about raising money, overseeing marketing, overseeing advertising, going to casting sessions, often callbacks, when it's like sort of later in the process. Every day is different for me, and it depends on where I am in the life of a show. Right now, if this was helpful, Sucks is about to go on tour, and we're in rehearsals, and I'm still raising money. And I'm
obsessed with the album. I haven't seen the show, but I'm obsessed with it.
Oh, it's so magnificent. I say this all the time. I believe it belongs in the canon of American musical theater, and I believe that with time, there are a lot of people who really believe it's as brilliant as I do, but I think with time it will get there, I hope. But so that's going on. I'm also co-producing Ragtime with my father, and I don't co-produce anymore. I haven't done it in 12 years. I don't co-produce, except I am doing it now, because it's a beautiful show. It's one of my favorites, and it's so powerful and so timely. And also I'm developing a new show called Wonder, based on the young adult novel and movie, and that's going to the ART at Harvard in December, and we just did a 4-week workshop. So I'm doing all the things, raising money for 3 different shows, and going to rehearsals, looking at casting tapes, and also reading scripts. I get submissions all the time, so reading things for that perhaps I'll get involved with down the line. So it's just, it's so producing, you're really, you're juggling a lot of balls in the air. Someone once said it's the art of saying yes, something like this, yes judiciously and no politely. Because you have to say no a lot. And, and it's gotten very difficult to produce on Broadway because of everything's gotten so expensive post-pandemic, and there's so much more competition, and people want to see George Clooney, which I understand, but it's it's a different, like for me, when I produce a new musical, I want the musical to be the star. So it's always been challenging, but it's become more so. But I still love it. I love the art.
So when you think about what you're doing now, because it's so clear how passionate you are about everything that you've worked on and are working on, and you're working on so many different clearly fulfilling projects. You mentioned earlier in this conversation that like in your 20s, oftentimes people don't know exactly what they wanted to do. And I think that's something I hear of often. I was only acting before I went to business school. So like I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I'm just curious if you, looking at everything that you've done and where you are now, if you think back to a time in your early 20s or just a time where you feel like you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do and you were kind of doubting it, what would you say to that version of yourself as like words of encouragement?
Well, I would definitely say that you should have more confidence. Because I remember when the last company I worked for in LA, I was a development executive. But I remember the first day I got there, I was in my early 20s, and I ran into someone when I got off the elevator who worked there, who was slightly older, and he said, "Oh, are you a producer?" And I said, "No." Like I was there interviewing to be an assistant, and I thought, like, no, how could I be a producer? I'm, But the truth is, he was a producer, and he was only a few years older than I was, and it's something I felt like I needed to, go through the whole process before I could actually do something like that, right? So I think, I lacked confidence, and I would love, it's like when I remember the Go-Go's were doing a show, and their lawyer it was a very good friend of mine, and asked me if I'd be interested in talking to them. So I went to see them at the Hollywood Bowl, and then I met them after, and they knew who I was. And I was like, oh my God, my 13-year-old brain is exploding. I mean, it was, it was so bananas to me. And I just, it's like, I would just love to, if I had known, I would just say, like, calm down. It's all going to be okay. And by the way, I say that to my son. I have a young son. And, I said, look, it all worked out. I just think, with age comes a lot of wisdom. I'm very proud, obviously, of being part of the Forbes 50 over 50, because obviously Forbes is an institution, but also because there's a lot to be gleaned, as you get older and you learn and you feel more comfortable with yourself and your skills, and the knowledge that you don't know everything, and it's okay. I learned so much on stuff, even from my producing partner, who is the person who brought me the project with Shayna. She's 20 years younger than I am. And our joke was that we were like the characters Alice Paul and Carrie Chapman Cat in the show, old guard, and and she's like, "You're not really Carrie," and I'm not. I like to think outside the box, but the truth is, it was just sort of fun to say that we were like that. And but I learned, she's a huge political advocate, and I learned a lot about advocacy from her, and how how important that was to our marketing of the story. So anyway, the point is, you never stop learning, and but trust in yourself when you're younger, and I also, I mean, I didn't do this when I was really young, but I always tell people to reach out to anyone that they are inspired by, and most people are not going to respond, but some people will. I always do, and because again, you just never know who that person might be or become in your life. But also, it's just a nice way to help young people, and certainly girls and young women. I mean, I'll help anyone. I'm an equal opportunity helper, but I do want to support the girl. I went to an all girls school, and obviously it's important to me.
Yeah.
To shore up women.
That wisdom resonates with me so much, and it's just really helpful and meaningful to hear about, like, the confidence building, even just like having it earlier in your career when you feel like you haven't done as much. It's hard to like feel that way. I'm always trying to work towards that, so I appreciate that. I'm going to rewatch that many times for myself. So of course I have to ask you about Hamilton. You just celebrated the 10th anniversary of Hamilton. I was watching all the videos of Lin-Manuel Miranda talking on stage. It's coming out in theaters. Can you talk about, I have so many questions about Hamilton, but what does it mean to you looking back?
I mean, it's a work of pure genius, and it is the most exciting and life-changing aspect of my life, for sure. And every moment along the way has been headier than the next, right? And it was so special to be there and to be surrounded by so many members of the original cast and alumni from the show, and just listening to them support the cast on stage and the love they had for everyone, and just even like noticing little details of a dance move. It was very, very special and poignant, and it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to even talk about Hamilton because I always believed that Lin was a genius. I thought like he had that spark. Obviously, In the Heights is wonderful, but it was a stepping stone to what he wrote with Hamilton, and I don't think he knew. I don't think anyone knew what he was really capable of. But yeah, looking back, it's just it's so it's brilliant, and it's so resonant for so many reasons, and it's interesting to look at it 10 years older, and sort of be affected by it in a different way, and I think other people were feeling that too. But yeah, I mean, I'm just so eternally grateful to have been involved with it, and to continue to be involved with it, obviously. But yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations on like,
yeah,
it's crazy. Can you talk about the early days of Hamilton? What was your first experience with the show or the music? Like, did you see the full show? Did you hear like one of the songs because you had worked with Lin for so long before? How early on were you like seeing all of it, and what was the process of that?
I heard my shot really early, and I wanted to be involved with it, as soon as I knew he was doing it, even when he thought it was just going to be a concept album. But then he did the thing at Lincoln Center, which I believe was 2011. He did the American Songbook at Lincoln Center with maybe 12 songs from the show, which was so brilliant. Jeffrey optioned the material, and Jeffrey was the first producer involved. I got involved a little later I think it was right after Vassar. So I was involved early, but not as early as Jeffrey. But yeah, I mean, what I saw at Vassar was insane. And then when we did I think it was a 4-week workshop, and they staged the first act And then they did the second act at Music Stands. I remember Mike Nichols was there and saying it was brilliant, and it was just, it was crazy. And then people just wanted to be involved with it, right? And started, tossing money at us. And that was before the public. We knew we were going to the public, but that was just a way to see it up on its feet. And yeah, I mean, no one could have possibly known what it would become or how it would take the world by storm and become such an important part of the cultural conversation. But I knew that it was something very special. And then at the public, we knew when famous people of all stripes were coming to see it and loving it, right? So Busta Rhymes and Michelle Obama and then the Clintons and just so many different people. And then I often say this, David Brooks wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times. And I'm pretty sure, I can't remember, I know it was before we opened, but I can't remember if it was before we opened off-Broadway. I think it was before we opened off-Broadway. But I just remember thinking, oh, wow, this doesn't happen. This is one of the premier op-ed writer columnists in the world, and he's writing about this show, and that means it's taken on a life of its own. It's entered a different kind of universe, right? So for me, that was a very, very big part of realizing, holy cow, this is going to be something extraordinary.
I think I read that op-ed when I was doing research for this interview and everything, and it's not common for that to happen so early on in a process.
It's not common for it to ever happen. I mean, it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's very rare.
Yeah.
They don't often write about theater.
Right. And do you feel, so I'm sure so many moments of the experience with Hamilton were surprising. Was there one, maybe it was that one, that like really sticks out to you as being the most surprising part of working with the show?
I'm gonna turn this a little bit and just say the most exciting and the most special moment for me.
Yeah.
Because I mean it was all surprising and all crazy, and everything kept topping everything else. Just when you thought it couldn't get any better, then But I just will never forget going to the White House and watching Chris Jackson as George Washington singing one last time. I think we were in the East Room. He was in front of a portrait of the actual George Washington singing to Obama in his final term in office. And every time I talk about it, I get chills. There's video of it, and you could see me just like grabbing for my tissues and crying, and it's like, that's it in a nutshell. It was, it was just like the quintessence of the whole experience for me and what it meant and why it was so powerful and why it was so important. And so anyway, that was the best, still to this day.
I'm going to go back and watch that because I've seen the performances, but I haven't looked for that specifically. So I'm going to have to go back and watch that.
It was unbelievable. And, I was there, and then, Obama was, 12 people away. I don't know. He was just down. It was mind blowing, really mind blowing.
It's crazy. When you think about the impact that Hamilton has had on the entire industry of theater and the arts, it changed theater. It changed the course of theater from the second that people knew about it. And it also changed the public perception of theater. You brought so many different groups of people who didn't have access to theater or weren't interested in theater and all of a sudden had a window into this art form. How does that feel to you?
Well, I didn't change an entire industry. Lin-Manuel Miranda changed an entire industry. I was in the room where it happened, so I'm very proud of that. And I also, I'm proud of the fact that I recognize his talent from a very early point. A lot of people say that I discovered him. I didn't discover him. A lot of people, knew how talented he was from the beginning, but I sat up and took notice. I put my money where my mouth was, and so, yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's amazing, and even just like being there the other night and having people say things like that to my father, telling me how proud he is of me, and someone saying, you were there first, and just even just like knowing that I was there at a very early part of his career. I'm just so proud of it. And I was just happy to be along for the ride on Hamilton. I mean, he's a genius. So that's all I'll say.
He's definitely a genius. If you were talking, just to pivot the conversation a little bit, if you were talking to someone who is earlier in their career and doesn't know what they want to do and doesn't know what steps to take to figure out what they want to do, is there anything you would say to that person who maybe has a lot of different interests and is entering the workforce and just feels kind of lost?
And are you talking about someone specifically in theater or just in general? Like what?
Just in general. I feel like I give career advice often just because I made a pivot. And so sometimes people ask me because I feel like I very obviously would have been one of those people who was lost, and like being in the theater space and then going into the business space and then not knowing exactly what you do as like an artist getting an MBA. And then I'm like, what do I want? Like, what do I do now? Right. And I didn't have any idea at the time of like, how do you even figure that out? And it took me so many conversations with people to just start making moves towards something that I felt like was the right move. So just to a young person who feels like they should know what they want to do but doesn't.
Right. Well, I always talk about passion being the most important part of what I do. And I think that people should find what they're passionate about and think about it, make lists, and if they can sort of narrow things down. I always trust my instincts, and like I said earlier, I always recommend reaching out to people you admire. And so if it's someone who is vaguely wants to be in a certain industry but isn't sure, you can reach out to people who are in, let's say it's publishing, right? You can reach out to literary agents. You could reach out to people who work at publishing houses. You could reach out to writers, just all people from that particular industry to sort of get a sense of what they do. A lot of people are willing to do, to have informational interviews, give someone 15, 20 minutes of their time just to give them a little advice. So, and I also just say, like, don't worry if you're not exactly sure, right? That it takes time, and life is not a straight line, and you have to sort of embrace the circuitousness of it, and do your research, right? On industries or areas that interest you.
So in terms of reaching out to people and asking for advice, you mentioned earlier that you always answer the messages when people ask you for advice. And I mean, you answered my messages. I remember the first time I emailed you, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm emailing you. And you responded, and it meant so much to me. And it also like taught me to, shoot farther than that I thought I could. Right. I'm curious, did you have someone do that for you that like inspired you to, you mentioned like other people helped you and you want to pay it forward. You clearly want to do that. I'm so grateful for your time. But what gives you that mindset and that generosity of spirit?
Oh, well, I think I was raised to be that kind of person, generous and kind. I like to think that I am both of those things just in my life. And I want to be treated, I want to treat people the way I want to be treated. And there were definitely people along the path who just, well, obviously my father being first and foremost, but a lot of people, and I remember Tom Pollock, who he passed away a few years ago, but he was the head of Universal Studios. I think in the 80s, maybe, I can't remember, I think the 80s. And my father was friends with him, and I remember seeing him at something, and he said, and at the time I wanted to be a film producer, and he said, what do you think is the most important element? I said, having good material, and he said, passion. And so that was sort of, that helped me really understand why passion was so important. But I just think, a lot of people have been nice to me and helpful to me. So I just, I like to, and I just think, it's scary out there, right? And it's getting scarier. And to be honest, at this point, I don't know how much I can help people, because like AI, all of the stuff that's going on is slightly terrifying to me. I mean, could be awesome, but also
me too.
I certainly don't know how to give advice around it. I think use it for good and use it to help yourself. Like it is a tool, and use it as a tool, but it's so beyond my understanding and frame of reference that I don't know, as the world progresses and gets more technologically insane, I don't know how much help I can, but I can always I'm always hopefully be able to provide just like basic sound advice about the industry or about career stuff.
I think it's such a beautiful sentiment. And if someone is listening to this and they're an aspiring theater producer, what advice would you give them? It's obviously a very challenging field to be in. It can be very unpredictable. What advice would you give to someone who sees your career and is like, I want to follow in her footsteps someday in some way? What would you say to that person?
I would say you should absolutely try. I would say you have to recognize that it's difficult, but that if you're passionate and you believe in the art and an artist, by all means, you should roll up your sleeves and do it. I tell people there's an organization called Commercial Theater Institute. They do, I think they're starting up, they have this 14-week intensive program for people who are interested in commercial theater, and they also do a long weekend event where, and I did that, and years and years ago, and it was a way to sort of learn about all the different aspects of the world, and you meet like-minded people, and you're also hearing from experts in the field. And I remember actually, when I went up, Jeffrey Seller was one of the panelists with Margot Lyon, I think. And I went up and said hi to him. I mean, this was obviously before In the Heights, and it's just weird how, but I'm sure he wouldn't remember that, but yeah, so I say, and there are a lot of them. My partner, Rachel Sussman on SUP, she started a company called The Business of Broadway, which is similar. They do it online. So I always say, learn as much as you can. There are internships, not really in commercial theater so much, but like in the not-for-profit space where you can learn a lot. If you can, work for a producer. If you're not sure what you want to do in the business, if you work at an advertising agency or a general management office, like there are ways to sort of absorb all the stuff that's going on. It's just recognize that it's hard, it's frustrating. If you want to produce something, I always recommend working with people who have done it before. It's not rocket science, but it is its own animal. And so I just think it's helpful. And like I said, I always want to work with people who are smarter than I am. So, I think that's helpful. And I also I'm very much a best idea in the room kind of person. So like, I don't care where so even though I want to work, when I started, I wanted to work with people like Kevin and Jeffrey who had done it, who I could learn from. I don't care if, an intern has a good idea, why shouldn't that intern be listened to just because, he or she is an intern. I mean, it's so stupid. And also, I'm happy to give them credit. I don't care about any of that. So, but anyway, so I just think, understand it's going to be difficult, but by all means, try it, and you never know. And it's incredibly rewarding. It's also incredibly frustrating, a lot. But I think probably any industry is, right? I mean, of course, there's going to be difficulties and hardships with the joy and the inspiration.
I think that was great advice. I want to make sure I ask you about Suffs because I can't get the soundtrack out of my head, and every time I watch the march, I get chills when I watch that song. Like, I actually, even if I watch, like, sometimes I'll just play it like 3 times in a row. It's just so invigorating and powerful. What has been your experience working on that show?
I am so incredibly proud of Suffs. I think it is a beautiful show. I think Shayna Taub is a genius. I don't use that word lightly. I know I've now used it twice. I happen to think she and Lin-Manuel are the best contemporary lyricists writing for musical theater today. I mean, obviously they're amazing composers too, but I think their lyrics are like blow your brains out, brilliant. And this is a story. I went to an all-girls school in New York. I never learned about Alice Paul and Carrie Chapman Catt. I learned about Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and maybe there was this much in my textbook about it. And I can't even, I mean, that's crazy to me. And an all-girls school, all-girls private school. So, when Shayna and Rachel came and pitched it to me, at the time, Rachel hadn't had commercial experience at the time, so they wanted to work with someone who did, and they wanted to work with a woman. And I was so blown away by Shayna, and also just the subject matter and the story the story she told is, it's, obviously she takes some poetic license because you have to as a dramatist, but it's true. All the crazy things that happened, they're actually true. And so it was thrilling to work on. I was also extremely proud because we did a lot of work. It was first at the Public Theater, and it got mixed reviews, and it felt a little more spinachy at the time. It was like a little more of a history lesson, and so we really got in there and worked and rolled up our sleeves and spent a year and a half further developing it. And there were a lot of people who just assumed, because most people don't do the work, they'll do some work, but a lot of times it's surface, or it's just, but we really did the work. So I just could not wait for people to see it, because I wanted to see, like, you'll see what we're talking about, right? And, am I upset that we couldn't run for longer? Yes. Do I think we deserve to? Yes. Do I think it was a particularly competitive year, and also an election year, which made it more difficult for us? Yeah, I mean, I think all those things contributed. But I'm so proud of it. It's going to be on PBS Great Performances, and it's going to be part of their 250th anniversary celebration. And, we'll go out on tour starting next month. We'll be in Seattle, and we're in 42 markets. And there's so many fun things planned around the country, in concert with the 250th and just in general. So, I think it's it's a beautiful show. It's so inspiring. It's so important for young girls and just kids to see it. So it's been, and we're in rehearsals right now for the tour, and I went yesterday, and the tour cast is phenomenal, and it made me giddy just being in there. It was so awesome to watch it again. And today, actually, I'm going, MTI has licensed the show, and they're doing a Suffs Junior presentation today, this afternoon. So I get to go see that, and it's it's like a 60 to 75 minute version of the show that kids can do, and so I can't wait. And that's since the beginning. That's what Shayna's wanted, kids to be able to do this in school and to learn about it, and so it makes me very proud.
That's amazing that there's going to be a version that kids can do. Like, I imagine the little girls being able to sing those songs. That's amazing.
And little boys can too.
And little boys.
Open to anyone.
Totally. This has been such an amazing conversation. I cannot thank you enough for your time. I have just one final question for you. Okay. I like to ask people this at the end of the conversation because I think everyone defines success differently. And I think it's important that people come up with their own definition or just their way of thinking about it, whether it's just, I want to stick to these values or this is what fulfillment means to me. So I'm just curious, what does success mean to you?
Well, it's interesting you're asking me this now, right after the subs conversation, because I'm often saying about it, I'm disappointed that we didn't make money and we couldn't last longer on Broadway. So I think it was deserving, but there are so many different ways to measure success. And I'm just so proud of having gotten that show out into the world. And I just think, success, it's such a good question. I could stop now and feel like I had done it and I've accomplished everything that I wanted to, and be very proud. But I still think there's so many more stories that need to be told, right? And I want to help to tell them. But I think it's a very personal word. And it certainly has different meanings for different people. So I'm not really answering it very well, but I think you just want to do what you're proud of. For me, you do what you're proud of. You make some sort of difference in someone's life, whether that's someone in the audience, whether it's someone on stage, what could be both. That to me, that makes me feel like I've been successful.
I love that. And I cannot thank you enough for sharing your advice and your wisdom and your stories. This has been such a great conversation. I was literally looking forward to this so much. I was so excited. So thank you so much for your time and generosity. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Your Career Unscripted. If something about this conversation inspired you, I'd love to know. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn at Jane Bernhard if there's a guest you'd want to hear from or if there's a type of background you'd like to learn from, and I'll do my best to make it happen. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe to my Substack and follow the series here, and perhaps share it with a friend who may need some words of encouragement. See you next time.